Welcome back to Creative Melbourne Podcast. So tonight we've got me, Karen, hosting, and online with me we've got Arthur, Brad, and Keith.
Hello.
Hi.
So tonight we're going to be exploring the topic of creativity and ecosystems. So creativity is a tool that a lot of individuals are now learning, and businesses are now embracing the whole idea of creativity and putting forward these tools that people can use. But is that really enough for creativity to actually exist? Do we need to think about the ecosystem, and is it just as important, or is it even more important?
I'll take a first crack at it. Oh, most definitely. You can't. The two are not separate. And I think it's over the last few months I've been having a lot of conversations and been doing a bit of research around thinking in systems. And it's been fascinating how many overlaps there are in terms of thinking in systems and creativity and innovation, right? Because you need to create the right environment for people to be creative and for an organization to be creative. It's not just the people itself, because you need to have, I think there needs to be some guidelines and heuristics and principles and philosophies to help shape how that creativity takes place within the ecosystem, whether it's a team ecosystem or an organization ecosystem or broader beyond that, right? And it's organizations definitely need to have the right environment in place for that creativity to flourish.
Actually, thinking about that, I'd like to go back to a point I mentioned earlier, and that's looking at the work of Teresa Amabile, who found that creativity is necessary in today's knowledge work environment. What she distilled out of her research on this, though, is 5 specific behaviours of leaders that create that can be used to ensure you have a creative environment and to encourage people to think more creatively. The 5 steps, the most important, are supporting people emotionally. Second is monitoring people's work in a positive way. So that means using a positive coaching technique, not criticising people for making mistakes. Give positive feedback on good work and information on where they need to improve. Third behaviour is recognising people for good performance, particularly in public settings. And that's not giving rewards necessarily, it's recognition. Fourth one I find interesting, and that's consulting with people on the team, asking for their views, respecting their opinions. Now, some leaders may see that as a sign of weakness. But the thing is, in complex businesses, a leader can't possibly know everything. They need to know about the business. They need to rely on others, including their own teams. The final one, there are a number of things, but most importantly, that the leader takes part in collaborating on the job with the people in their team. They actually spend time working with them. And I think that's one you need to be careful with. You must be careful you're not seen to be interfering or micromanaging, but just actually working as part of the team. Now, I've actually put some of those in practice in roles I've worked in, and they're incredibly powerful things to do. And again, it's about behaviour. So creating the right environment isn't necessarily about things or necessarily actions. It's about behaviour of the leader.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's lead them more as facilitator rather than directing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's balancing the behaviour to the context, and that's something that we talk about in the organisational zoo a lot. But the in an ecosystem environment, we're trying to create between people so that there's you build the trust, and if you build the trust, then people will share, and if people start sharing more ideas, that reinforces the trust, which then increases collaboration, and overall that you get much better flow and co-creation of new possibilities. So the organisation can move forward if it operates as an ecosystem. Two authors, Sharma and Kauffer, about 5 years ago, wrote a book called Leading from the Emerging Future, from ecosystem to ecosystem economies. And they were saying about, sort of, hierarchies and structure and rigid process, just like Ken Robinson says in the school system, it limits possibilities and ideas. It holds things back. And of course you need structure, right? But we can't say we're going to have no structure and we're just going to go to total chaos. But equally, we can't, sort of allow the structure to dominate, and that's where the problem lies. So, if you look at a natural ecosystem, it's in harmony. You've got your predators and you've got your prey. You've got your plants and you've got your water and you've got your animals. And if any one of them get out of balance, the ecosystem becomes unsustainable. Now look at an organization as an ecosystem. You need structure, you need decision making, you need intelligence, you need emotion, and you need trust. And if any one of these elements is out of harmony with the others, then you get an unsustainable ecosystem. But if you can harmonize these things, the creativity and the logic and the emotion and the structure, then it just flows, and that's what we're trying to do here. An ecosystem is a self-balancing thing that continues to grow. A hierarchy tries to control it, and in the end, if it gets out of balance, over control ends up holding things back. No control, you end up with chaos.
Yeah, and I mean, I think of the George, I can never get his last name right, the pronunciation. Is it Monbiot?
I'm not sure of the guy, but yeah.
Mbiot. But anyway, so he's big on rewilding, right? So he uses this example of Yellowstone National Park, where wolves had been hunted to the point where there were no wolves left in the park. And what had happened was all the deer and the moose and antelope, whatever that were in the park, came down and started eating all the grass, which meant that there was less food for the other animals in the system. So they started moving out, which led to less birds, and it really changed the physical topography and layout.
Meant that the riverbanks were chewed up and muddy, and the rivers were destroyed, basically, were no longer clean water.
Exactly. So, and then they tried this experiment and reintroduced wolves back into the park, right? And what they found was it was a rebalancing. So as Arthur was saying, it rebalanced. And to Keith's point about the river, after a period of time, you had more animals came in, the deer and the moose moved onto higher ground to stay out of the reach of the wolves, which meant that more of the smaller animals and wildlife came back and resettled into the area, to the point that it changed the structure of the river itself, so that it readjusted itself to what it had been originally before the system had been tinkered with. So I think just if you use the ecosystem analogy with creativity and any organization, whether it's schools to a corporate, there needs to be a recognition of what's the lay of the land, right? What's that topography? What are we working with? And in the groups of people that we have that operate in their own little ecosystem, which area of that land are they most comfortable in? The valleys, on the hillsides, in a tree, in a river, whatever. Because once teams find there'll be groupings that will work naturally, will work really well in a particular part of the land, still going with that analogy. And it's allowing people to have that natural fit and to find that sense of balance, rather than trying to say our policy is X, so therefore our process and our program is Y and Z, and you need to fit into that, right? So rather than trying to stick complex, creative beings into very rigid boxes, let them explore in the space that you've created within your organization. And that can extend to physical space, to your policies, your programs, the people that are around to support them. So you have this system where there's enough tension that it balances itself up. It allows people to find their space and to work at their own pace as well, which I think is a big part of creativity and ecosystems. And it's hard to be creative. I mean, I think back to a recent work experience where my role was to introduce and facilitate creativity and creative thinking, but it was hard to do when I was spending 7 out of 8 hours of my day in meetings, right? So if you look at from a workflow perspective, if you're wanting people to be creative and you're wanting to innovate, you can't expect them to be doing the work of 1.5 to 2 people with back-to-back meetings working 8-hour days, because they don't have the space and the energy and capacity to dedicate to thinking creatively and practicing innovation.
No, I think that's right, Brad. You're really reinforcing the point of, sort of balance. It's not this or that in modern environments. And Keith mentioned complexity. In complex environments, which all environments where humans are interacting are, it's not this or that. It's this and that and that and that and that. So the issue that we have is the wolves and the lions in charge of the organizational ecosystem are very controlling, very risk averse. So what happens is when good ideas get raised from creative people, they look at it and go, well, has that ever been proven before? They don't want to do something that is not already proven. You go, well, hang on a minute.
Where's the evidence?
Yeah. And actually, this paper I'm writing at the moment, they're saying, where's the evidence, for these, sort of applied social learning systems? So I go, they don't exist. That's the problem. Actually, they do exist, because the Finland education system has moved to this already.
It's incredible what they've done.
Yeah. And following them, South Korea have now moved. And they go, yes, This is great. So let's just do it, So, and they look at, the whole rather than the component. And they allow autonomy of the learners, which stimulates creativity, which creates a broader diversity of options, which then gives people more to contemplate, and it's just like a positive spiral. And that's what we're not doing enough of. And that's why if every decision in the organizational ecosystem is left to a few risk-averse people, then they don't even employ the right people, because they go, geez, Karen, she's a bit, sort of creative. I'm not sure that we can control her. Let's not employ her. And, these are just bad decisions made one after the other. And these organizations are getting left behind by the new creative organizations.
Yeah. And there's that saying, with when you're recruiting for people who are just like you, which is completely counter to, bringing in enough diversity to create that, create the creative tension that you need. Because you do need that tension. You can't have everyone who thinks the same and behaves the same and has the exact same background, because you're not having enough diversity to stimulate that creativity, to create that creative tension.
Yeah, no, exactly right. So the current method that got us to where we are was efficient and effective. But the mindset of efficiency and effectiveness has gone to the point where everything needs to be controlled too tightly. And when you start controlling things too tightly, you lose that sustainable growth factor. I mean, every ecosystem evolves, right? And as if the elements get out of balance, as you said before about the wolves and the other animals in Yellowstone, then if it gets out of balance, then you end up with a system that is unsustainable. So you need to rebalance it. And this is what we have to do in business. If we can put the creativity back into the business, we can have an ecosystem which is sustainable and growing, rather than a hierarchy which is static, because the world is changing too quickly for a static environment.
Well, Arthur, you mentioned the word complexity before, and without delving too far into that topic, the point you make is that we've still got so many people thinking about efficiency and effectiveness. And as you say, that did work last century. That works in ordered systems where things are predictable. As businesses become more and more complex and less predictable, that approach is not going to work. You need to be much more flexible and adaptable because the business and the organisation you're working with is also changing while you're trying to work with it.
Yeah, and it goes back to the school system, right? The school system is still that industrialized model of you come here, we're going to give you information, you regurgitate it, and we are preparing you for the workplace, right? And that is just it's redundant. It doesn't work anymore. You know, you can't. And again, if you come back to creativity and innovation in organizations, it's difficult to try and retrain people and retrain their brains if they've been told for so long that you need to break everything into its component parts, reduce it to its, individual little bits and pieces, and don't think about it too much, don't critique it, just regurgitate information. And I mean, even if you look at the whole concept of standardized testing, that's a topic all on its own, but it limits that ability to explore, let your mind explore and play and test and experiment. Because you're training kids to think in a very binary way, right? Like something's either right or wrong. There's no room for play and mistakes and testing.
What we're doing is we're giving people a toolkit and teaching them how to use the tools. And what we should be doing is teaching them how to understand the situation and create the tools they need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the skills of sense making, reading the situation rather than just assuming what's going on, thinking about differences in patterns rather than trying to assess according to, well, what kind of thing is this? Because it's probably an unknown thing. The term VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. It just keeps coming out, particularly in things like where they talk about, the 4IA, the fourth industrial age, or the fourth industrial era. The fact that everything is now so quickly connected to everything else. How can the traditional education system, which is all about learning what things fit in what boxes, prepare someone when it's a bit like Cirque du Soleil say there are no boxes. That's why they're so creative. We don't categorize. We explore and feel and sense the way forward, but then turn that around with some structure and put it into a thing called a show, which makes this working in an unpredictable way, but building your confidence to make decisions when you're not sure and it is a risk enables you to move ahead. And that's where the learning comes in, because every time you do something new, if it went well, you learn something. If you made a mistake, you learned something. So that idea of learning, driving our ecosystem to grow, enables us to control the risk and to restructure, and instead of trying to control it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing, Arthur, is around this risk management and risk averse. Yeah. And I mean, this is the thing, right? If you look in the context that organizations operate in, everything is about, containing your risk, managing your risk, being compliant, which is not exactly in line with being creative, because exploring creativity and being innovative entails a degree of risk. I mean, we're not talking about, building a new kind of explosive, but it's, because you need a controlled environment. But it's just that the whole thinking that organizations find themselves in is that you need to limit your risk. Don't make mistakes. Yeah, it doesn't reward risk taking, because risk taking is seen as a bad thing.
Yeah, and that's where Dave Snowden's concept of safe fail instead of fail safe. He talked about that in the Harvard Business Review article in 2007, and what you want to do is to create a trusted environment where it is okay to fail, but do it in a safe way. And look at the motto of NASA, lean forward and fail safely. So you've got to encourage that possibility of failure, because it's actually through failure that a lot of whole new opportunities come out, right? I mean, penicillin was an accident. It was a failed experiment. Look at the benefits. It's literally saved millions of lives over decades. So that ability to step out of the boxes and explore and be creative gives you a much more, not so much robust ecosystem, but a resilient one. And when we shift from robustness to resilience, we end up in a much better place.
Yeah, and resilience is more elastic than robustness. Robustness sounds more constrained, right? More rigid.
Yeah.
Whereas resilience, it gives you a bit of play.
Yeah, and it gives you that flexibility to be a bit edgy, but at the same time consciously edgy in order to learn, sort of what's going to work and what's not going to work. It's not that you just have, total, lack of control. You've got that entrepreneurial risk-taking mindset, to seek to create new options.
It was controlled chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.